In this video, we're going to have an R script that's going to read some data, some world happiness data, in from an Excel file that's on the internet, and then just play some basic games, get that data frame and eliminate some columns, maybe do some calculation and add a new column, uh, do some basic statistics and do, say, a box and whiskers plots, and then play a few tricks to sort of dress that up a bit. So let's get started. So bring in the openxlsx library. You may have to go through some install if you've not used it before. I have used it before. And so I'm bringing that in. So here is, and let me just show you the full URL. If you want it, I think I will try to post the R data somewhere, like in a comment. But so this is this happiness data, and Finland is the happiest place or something like that. And it has all of these columns. It had sort of way too many columns for me. So one thing I did here was eliminate some of the columns. So I'm taking the World Happiness Report using square brackets and this comma, and this is sort of what I'm taking out. I'm taking out columns 3, 4, 5, and 12 through 19. Okay, so there were about 19 observations, and this is like one based. So the country name is 1, and this, what they call the ladder score, is 2, and I'm eliminating, there's a standard error of the ladder score in the upper and the lower whisker. So that's the 3, 4, 5 that I'm getting rid of. And then I'm getting rid of all these explained by sort of things at the end. So that's what I'm doing here. And so now I have 8 variables: the country name, the ladder score, the GDP, and social support. And so just sort of, there were sort of explanations or other manipulations of the data, and I've just sort of thrown those out just to sort of show that I can. And now I'm, the next thing I'm going to do is rename. So these, I got this file from like the World Happiness Report, sort of searched that on the internet, brought down the data, and then put that file up on my website so I could access it this way. But their names are sort of complicated, so I wanted simpler names to play with. And so that's what I'm doing here, using the names method, and then this new vector of names. And so now I have sort of simpler names: just country, ladder, GDP, social support, life expectancy, freedom, generosity, and corruption. Okay. So now if you want to do some statistics on this, sort of my first video where I did R statistics, I had a vector. But now, since I've read a file, I have a data frame, or especially since I used this library in Excel, I got a data frame. Sometimes some of the, I think there's a different Excel library where you end up with a list. But then, so if you want to do any statistics, you pick I'll, interchange, I'll call it component or field or column. If I wanted to do this, what they call the ladder, then I'm going to use a $sign. So there's a square bracket notation and there's a $sign notation, and they're not always the same. Sometimes you can get away with either. Sometimes you need a specific one. And so here I'm just taking the mean, the average of these ladder values. So let me run that there. So the average is the 5.5. Okay. So now if I have, as I do here, I have these 8 variables, I could do some calculation for all of the rows for all of the countries, and I can add that as a new field. So I got rid of fields, now I'm adding fields. And I'm going to do my calculation here is going to be a simple one called like the Z. So there is an average or the mean and a standard deviation. Those are both statistical quantities that R knows how to calculate. And if I take a given score and subtract the mean and then take that difference and divide it by the standard deviation, then I'm getting what they call the Z score. And so this will tell me sort of, it'll measure how far I am above or below the average standardized by standard deviations. So let me run that. So this is going to go up to nine variables because I've introduced this, I called it ladder underscore Z. It's the Z scores for the ladder. And now the mean was like 5.54 or something. And so the Z for the first country, Finland, is a 1.99, and then it goes down to negative values. And here I'm just checking. I can also do the mean and the standard deviation of this new quantity. And what the Z-score is supposed to do is, I don't know, normalize or standardize those values. So the mean should be 0. It's going to be scientific notation, some small number close to 0, and the standard deviation should be 1. So there they are. The mean was minus 2.54, but times 10 to the minus 16, a very small number, almost 0, and the standard deviation was 1. Okay, now I'm going to make a box plot. I'm going to start I'm just playing around with some colors. And so I'm going to make in Excel what would be called the chart area, the sort of whole thing. I'm going to make this is I'm using an RGB thing here, and so it's full on red and lots of green and lots of blue. So this is going to be sort of a pink. And I'm not going to see anything here. I'm just sort of setting the background sort of to be pink. And now I'm going to make a box plot of the ladder values. I'm going to give it a title of World Happiness Ladder Values, and I'm going to make the box of the box plot a light blue. So there it is. Okay. So the box plot, the box in a box plot goes from the first quartile to the third quartile. The median or the second quartile is that sort of fat line in the middle. And then you go, there's a definition of something, if something is an outlier. So you go from the highest, either the highest value or the highest non-outlier value to the lowest. So the whiskers go from the lowest non-outlier to the highest non-outlier. And then if there are any outliers, and there is one in this case, R is drawing it, the box plot of R is drawing it as a little bubble, a little circle here to indicate it's outside of the box and whisker, this outlier. Okay, so now I'm just want to make one more little playing around with color. So again, back to like what Excel would call it, this whole big pink area is the chart area, say in Excel, then the square here, the rectangle here is what they call the plot area in Excel. So I'm making a color. Now I don't want to lose what I've got, so I need to make it somewhat transparent. So we're sort of making sort of a half transparency here. So I'm making a color, sort of no red, a little bit of green, mostly blue, and then I'm going to add it to the reds of what's behind because I'm making it transparent, so it's going to come out as a little bit purple. And then here is this, this par user 1, 2, 3, 4 thing sort of is this sort of preset stuff that is sort of figuring out where this rectangle is. And so then we are making this blue rectangle over the graph, but because of it's transparent, I can still see my data and such. Okay. Now, and we've seen to do we can have all the individual functions like mean and standard deviation. There is a thing called boxplot.stats, which will tell me the number of these quantities that go into the making of the box plots. So if I run that, we see down here in the terminal that here are what they call the stats of the box plot. And this is that lowest non-outlier. And this is the first quartile, the median, the third quartile, and the highest non-outlier, which is in this case also the maximum. And then here is the value of the one outlier down here. And so this just sort of produced those quantities here and sort of displayed them down here in the terminal. That was done by this 18 here. Now what I'm going to do is loop over them, loop over the stats. So this box data was a number of things, but I'm going to be interested in the stats part of it. So I'm going to go box data stats is this vector. And I'm going to loop over the elements in that vector. And I'm going to make a text that has an x value of 1.35, which I just sort of poked around, played around. There's no set scale here. So I just played around and 1.35 seemed to work. And then I wanted what I called X to be the Y value. Maybe that's a little absurd, but that is these values. And then I actually want to also display. So this is where it's being displayed, an X of 1.35, a Y of the value X. And then I also want to display the value, and I wanted it rounded because I didn't want, 8 decimal places or however many it was giving me. So there they are. So it's just telling me the values of these various lines in the box plot. I'm playing here with a different thing. I guess I could do some if there was an outlier, then display that, but I didn't do that. Here I'm doing something different. I'm getting the summary statistics. So not the statistics specifically of the box plot, but the summary of statistics of the data itself. So it's the standard here is to get the minimum, the first quartile, the median, the mean, the third quartile, and the max, which is a lot of the same information, but it's but the minimum is the minimum, whereas the lowest stat value was when we did the box plot stats, the lowest thing was the non-outlier. So there's a difference here between box data stats and the summary stats because of the outliers. Okay, but I got the summary statistics, And this is sort of a set of, I'll call them, an associative array or key value pairs. So there is a quantity here, a value here, and it has a key of minimum. So I decided that I wanted to add those. I'm going to add those on the other side. And so I went to my summary statistics and I went through the names of them. So that's going to pick out my keys: min, first quartile, median. Okay. And then I'm looping over those names of those quantities. I'm going to print those, so I will just sort of see them down here in the console. And then I am using text to add, here's my X value of 0.65. That's going to be over here somewhere. I'm going to do sum of P, which is going to get me the number. And then I am concatenating, pasting together the key, which is the word like min first quartile, and then sum of key rounded. So this is going to be the value rounded to 3 decimal places, but I'm also going to give the key. So it's going to be named first quartile, third quartile. And then this is the me positioning it on the graph. And I added an if, and the median and the mean are relatively close. So if I don't do something here, those two values are largely overwriting each other. So I said if the key is not mean, add it to the text. So there we go. Okay. And then we see down here again this difference between the box stats and the summary stats. In this, the box stats, the lowest stats of the box stats was the non-outlier, whereas in these Puron summary statistics, what they're calling the minimum there is the minimum value, which in this case happens to be an outlier. So that's that difference down here between the whisker, the line that shows me the end of the whisker, versus the actual minimum data. If it's an outlier, those are not the same. So that's what I wanted to do here, is just, play with the colors, play with adding some of this information to the box plot, and also just, read some data from Excel, add and subtract fields, and just, do some, not too many things, but some things to sort of show off. All right, that's all for this one. Thanks for your attention.